This is Detective Recapped. Today, I'm going to explain a romance comedy film called She's Out of My League, which shows the mysterious ways love works, the sheer destructiveness of insecurity, and the mishaps that come with staining your pants. This follows the life of an average Joe who falls hard for a woman he believes will never even look his way. However, when the woman falls for him, the man is left trying to prove not just others, but himself too, that this is all real. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. If you want to make it in this big bad world, believing in yourself and feeling sure about your abilities are half the battle. Sadly, the word confidence isn't in Kirk Kettner's dictionary. Timid TSA agent Kirk Kettner and his ex-girlfriend Marnie have taken some time off from their relationship, but now Kirk wants them to be together again. As Kirk practices what he should say to Marnie, his friends can't help but mock him for being kind of pathetic. His friend Stainer makes it clear that he hates the girl, but Kirk has his heart locked on her. Jack then advises Kirk on what to do, telling him to make Marnie believe that he's been seeing different girls after their breakup. But Devon tells Kirk he should just be himself. For better or for worse, Kirk follows Jack's advice. At home, he tells Marnie how well he's been doing with the ladies lately, but Marnie doesn't believe him for a second. She reminds him that she's with Ron now, but Kirk still begs her to take him back. Kirk is annoyed that Marnie replaced him with a guy who owns a Pizza Hut, but Marnie insults him too, saying that working as a TSA agent isn't getting him any closer to being a pilot. As Kirk keeps trying to convince Marnie to get back with him, Kirk's mother suddenly shows up and is shortly followed by his brother, Dylan, and his pregnant fiancée, Debbie, who both like to bully him. Their father shows up too, leaving Kirk distracted from winning back the girl he loves. Things keep looking down for poor Kirk. Though Marnie split with him, she's still an honorary Kettner family member, seeing as Kirk's parents have practically adopted her since they broke up. Seeing her every day in his house while she has a new man is basically adding injury to insult. Though Marnie has plenty of insults to go around for Kirk, with how little she respects him, it's a pity that Kirk lets her treat him that way. But then again, he's getting the same overbearing treatment from his brother too. One day, Kirk is working at the Pittsburgh International Airport when he sees a gorgeous event planner named Molly McLeish getting harassed. He helps her get through the security easier, and Molly thanks Kirk for being nice. As soon as she gets on her plane, Molly tells her best friend, Patty, that her phone is missing. Patty quickly calls Molly's phone, and after the girls learn that Kirk has it, Molly asks him to return it to her the next day at the Warhol Museum. The next day, Devon accompanies Kirk to the museum, and Kirk can't help but feel nervous about meeting the woman. Inside, Kirk asks a waitress, who happens to be Molly's sister, Katie, where she is, and Katie happily tells him where to find her. Upon seeing each other, Molly introduces Patty to Kirk and Devon, and Kirk follows suit. Molly thanks him for returning her phone before asking them to stay. While they're having a drink, a waitress tells Kirk that she finds Devon attractive, and his friend can't believe what the woman just said. Katie then arrives and offers them some mushrooms, and once she turns to leave, she bumps into Kirk, who accidentally spills his drink on the museum director. This leads Kirk and Devon getting kicked out of the museum. Molly makes it up to him by inviting him to a hockey game the next day, saying he can also bring a friend. Unlike his friends and colleagues, Kirk is a complete gentleman. Molly probably picked up on this, and she appreciates that he actually respects her instead of treating her like a piece of meat. Unfortunately, even if Molly finds him charming and interesting, the idea will never cross Kirk's mind. After learning about the hockey game, Kirk's friends tell him that Molly might be into him, but Kirk won't hear them out. He is certain that Molly will never like someone like him since she's so hot, but Stainer reminds him that that's what he also said about Marnie. As if on cue, Marnie arrives, and she asks Kirk if he's going to Branson with his parents the next month. When Kirk says he's not going, Marnie informs him that she's going with his parents and that she's taking Ron with her. Stainer feels sorry for his friend, but Kirk just ignores him. At the game, Kirk expresses how surprised he is that Molly actually showed up. Stainer then introduces himself to Patty, who clearly isn't interested in him. Once the game starts, Molly ends up impressing Kirk and Stainer with her hockey knowledge, and the four of them cheer for the players the whole time. During the break, Molly and Stainer decide to buy some more beer, and while they're gone, Patty tells Kirk that Molly likes him. Kirk tells his friends about this in a bowling alley, and all of them have a hard time believing him, especially Stainer. In turn, Kirk just ignores them and continues to bowl. Suddenly, a guy tells Kirk to back off and let him play first, but Stainer quickly comes to his aid. The guys almost brawl it out, but everyone soon settles down. Stainer goes on to tell their friends that Kirk's a 5, while Molly's a 10. As Kirk's friends discuss his questionable situation, Molly calls and asks him out. Everyone but Stainer cheers for him. Sadly, the people in Kirk's life are more than ready to take advantage of his zero sense of self so they can bully him around. From Marnie, whose middle name might rhyme with Hitch, to Stainer, who has a name tag that says, "I don't believe in my friend at all, and I want the whole world to know about it." As for Kirk, he's focused on his and Molly's physical appearance that he fails to see that not everyone is hung up on looks. When Patty learns about Molly's date with Kirk, she tells her friend that she's only dating the guy because her ex-boyfriend, Cam, hurt her. Patty thinks that Molly is trying to play it safe by dating Kirk, but Molly insists that she finds Kirk nice. At work, Kirk keeps wondering why Molly asked him out, and just like him, Stainer is confused too. While they talk, a cashier waves at them, and Stainer tells Kirk to ignore her, adding that she's just some girl he slept with. During their dinner time, Molly impresses Kirk as she talks to the waiter in French. He is also surprised to learn that she's a lawyer, but their conversation is interrupted when Kirk cuts her off to return a sweater to a lady who's just left the restaurant. Her husband mistakes Kirk for a waiter since he's wearing the same suit they do, and even offers him a tip, but Kirk clarifies that he doesn't work there. Heading back inside, he finds Molly talking to her ex-boyfriend, Cam. He thinks that Kirk's a waiter too, and goes ahead to take a seat. But when Molly tells him that Kirk's with her, Cam quickly apologizes to him. Before he leaves, Cam asks Molly if he'll see her again next week. Molly explains to Kirk that Cam is her and Patty's liaison guy at an air show, but Cam adds that he and Molly used to date. With how different Kirk is from Cam, it's no wonder that Patty finds it hard to believe that Molly wants to date Kirk. However, Molly is done with the likes of Cam, and she clearly enjoys Kirk's company. But the more the two get to know each other, the more Kirk is reminded that Molly is way out of his league. And not just looks-wise at that, she's cultured, well-informed, successful, and attractive. It'll probably be a cold day in hell before Kirk would use any of those words to describe himself. After dinner, Molly explains why she didn't pursue being a lawyer and how she ended up being an event planner. Kirk then shares why he became a TSA agent, revealing that he actually wants to be a pilot. Molly urges him to follow his dreams, but Kirk believes it won't be easy for him to do it. Molly then admits that her father doesn't even know that she quit the firm, but she hopes that he'll someday understand, showing Kirk that she has her own problems too. As the night deepens, Patty tries calling Molly to see if she's doing okay, but Molly ignores her call. When Kirk finally drives Molly home, she asks him if he's thinking about Cam, and Kirk lies, saying he isn't. Kirk helps Molly as she struggles to unbuckle her seatbelt, and she uses the opportunity to kiss Kirk gently, leaving him in shock. After everything, Kirk shares their kiss with his friends, and Jack and Devin are happy for him. As for Stainer, he's still trying to digest the news. Kirk also tells them that he's introducing Molly to his parents, making Stainer believe that she'll run for the hills as soon as she meets his family. For some reason, people like to think that everyone shares whatever standard they have. Though Kirk isn't cut from a conventionally charming cloth, it's still baffling how much Stainer and Patty, among other people, look down on him and believe that his relationship with Molly is like a carton of milk just waiting to expire. At Kirk's house, his parents can't believe that he's taken home such a beautiful woman. He then introduces Molly to Dylan, Debbie, Ron, and Marnie, all of whom are in disbelief that Kirk is with her. While having lunch, Marnie dresses up nicely in an attempt to take everyone's attention away from Molly. As everyone talks to Molly, Dylan asks her why she's with Kirk, and Molly tells them that Kirk makes her smile and never tries to impress her. She also adds that she can be herself around Kirk, making Marnie jealous. Mrs. Marnie then invites Molly to their family vacation in Branson, and when Molly says she and Kirk will go, Marnie reveals to her that Kirk is her ex-boyfriend. However, Molly doesn't find her revelation surprising and just ignores her. After eating, Kirk and Dylan play Slapshot Regatta in the basement, leaving their ladies cheering for them. After Dylan loses, Kirk drives Molly to her place, and she invites him inside her apartment. Kirk gets scared upon seeing the family dog, but Molly quickly gets his attention once she starts making out with him. As Molly gets on top of him, Kirk tries and fails to keep himself from reaching his climax. And if that isn't enough, Molly's sister and parents arrive unexpectedly, and Kirk is forced to keep seated so they won't notice his wet pants. Unfortunately, the dog starts licking Kirk's pants, so he hurriedly leaves the apartment, confusing everyone. While embarrassing, what happened to Kirk could have happened to anyone, right? But of course, Molly's family and her dog had to turn what would have just been a mildly mortifying situation into a complete disaster. Kirk better pray that first impressions don't last, because he managed to make himself look rude in front of Molly's family. On the flip side, Kirk's family clearly likes Molly, and it looks like Marnie is beginning to regret her decision of leaving Kirk. That, or she just can't bear to see the guy who spent the longest time pining for her finally moving on. At work, Kirk's friends make fun of him for his little mishap. Marnie then shows up, and she asks Kirk to get back with her, especially since he knows deep down that he and Molly will never work out. However, Kirk says he's still with Molly, pissing Marnie off and causing her to walk away. Sadly for Kirk, Molly isn't answering his calls, and he's worried that he's just ended their relationship. To cheer Kirk up, Jack tells him that anything is possible, but Kirk isn't sure anymore. Devin then advises Kirk to be real, saying he should fight for Molly if he believes she's the one for him. After some time, Kirk and his friends attend Molly's air show, where Kirk finally admits to Molly what happened that night. The two of them eventually make up, and as Kirk rejoices with Jack and Devon, Cam suddenly shows up and asks to talk to him in private. Cam reveals that he plans to take Molly back. Stainer then gets off Cam's light aircraft, and when Jack and Devon follow them, Cam tells Kirk that he can do better with his choice of friends. Despite this, Kirk and Molly go on a few more dates, and things just keep getting better for them. It's desperate and pathetic of Marnie to think that Kirk would simply take her back, especially now that he's happy with someone else. She's just jealous because she never thought that Kirk would be happy without her, which goes to show how vain she is. Then there's Cam, who has no respect for neither Kirk nor Molly and their relationship, since he thinks it's in his place to get Molly back. Maybe he and Marnie should hook up, since they're both hung up on their own delusions about their scores with their exes. One day, Kirk's friends advise him to finally take his relationship with Molly to the next level. Thinking that they're right, Kirk decides to prepare himself by shaving his private area, only to nick himself by accident. Being a true bro, Devin does the shaving for Kirk, leaving Kirk feeling uncomfortable. At Katie's party, Kirk apologizes to Molly's parents for his behavior a few nights ago, promising that he'll grow on them. When Molly's father asks Kirk what his work is, Molly answers for him and tells them he's in aviation. As they talk, Cam suddenly shows up and makes Kirk feel out of place. Annoyed, Kirk decides to drink by himself, but Cam joins shortly and apologizes for what he said about taking Molly back. He then tells Kirk to take care of Molly, saying she's a special girl. And when Kirk adds that she's perfect, Cam tells him that Molly hates being called that. When Kirk gets confused, Cam explains that Molly has a birth defect but refuses to tell him what and leaves. Evidently, Cam is trying to plant doubts in Kirk's head, and it looks like he's succeeding. Not listening to a bitter guy like Cam should be common sense for most people, but insecurity has a way of chipping at your common sense until you end up trusting others more than yourself. And as usual, Kirk lets other people's opinion sway his thinking. After the party, Kirk and Molly go back to her apartment to sleep together, where Kirk expresses his insecurities about his body. Molly doesn't mind though, and shows him her webbed toes to prove that she isn't as perfect as he thinks. Kirk then realizes that that's the defect Cam was referring to, pissing Molly off since he's hoping that there's something wrong with her so they could be together. This has Kirk getting emotional, and he admits how he really feels about their relationship, especially with how she's a 10 while he's just a 5. Kirk's also offended that Molly lied to her parents about his job, making him believe that she's embarrassed of him. The two continue arguing, and this is when Molly realizes that Kirk has a low self-esteem. She finds it irritating that Kirk keeps comparing himself to others, and she tells him that she broke up with Cam because he cheated on her, and from then on, she promised herself that she'll never date a guy like Cam again. Naturally, this insults Kirk since he's led to believe that Molly only dated him because he's boring and safe. Kirk leaves upset and unaware of how much he's hurt Molly too. This shows how much insecurity can poison not just your mind, but the way you deal with people in your relationships. Molly has the right to be upset that Kirk seems so relieved by her defect, just as Kirk has the right to be upset that Molly lied about his job. Kirk and Molly are both insecure in their own right, and while Molly's insecurity manifests through how she feels the need to maintain a very specific image for her parents, Kirk's is much more debilitating and unsparing to him. Before the Kettners fly to Branson, Kirk tells Stainer that he was right when he said he wasn't good enough for Molly. Confused, Stainer talks to the woman he once slept with and asks why things didn't work out between them. The woman reveals that she didn't like how he was always doubting himself and thinking that she'd dump him, making Stainer see that he's made a mistake telling Kirk he's a 5. He then tries to get Kirk off the plane so he can fix his relationship with Molly, but Kirk simply refuses. Eventually, Stainer gets kicked off the plane, so he calls Patty for help to get their friends back together. Meanwhile, Kirk finally realizes that Stainer is right and decides to go after Molly, but before he does, he makes sure to tell everyone in his family except his mother how much he hates them. Unfortunately, the flight attendant won't let him leave anymore, so he is forced to stay with them. Across town, Patty picks up Molly and takes her to the airport, where she and Stainer inform her that Kirk is leaving for Branson with Marnie. After some convincing, Molly goes with Stainer to get on Kirk's plane, but after learning that it has already departed, Stainer calls Jack to stop the aircraft from leaving. Jack successfully delays Kirk's flight, and everyone deplanes. Marnie keeps hounding Kirk, so he throws his family shirt on her, making her angry. Finally, Kirk fully grasps the idea that he and Molly are meant for each other. It may have taken him a bit longer, but people say it's better late than never. But what's even better is that Kirk is now standing up for himself, and he's not letting his family or Marnie push him around anymore. Marnie chases Kirk through the crowd, but Kirk is ecstatic to learn that Molly's waiting for him at the gate with Stainer. Though Marnie is determined to stop Kirk from reuniting with Molly, Kirk is set on finding Molly too. She follows Kirk when he hops on an electric airport car, forcing him to hit her with a bag so she'd leave him alone. Kirk then eventually finds Molly, and in front of his family, Molly tells Kirk how much she likes him despite his issues and imperfections. The two finally get back together, and after some time, Kirk successfully becomes a pilot and takes Molly to Cleveland on a plane. With how overwhelming everyone and everything can be, it's hard to come out of the daily hustle and bustle feeling good about yourself, especially if you're not dealing with life as well as you could be. So while everyone can benefit from exercising a healthy amount of self-doubt, having too much of it is just pure poison. It's a fire that festers from within and seeps through, burning everything you come into contact with. Mankind will sooner develop flying cars before it can come up with a clear-cut cure for insecurity and a lack of self-esteem. But at the end of the day, one thing we can do is not to assume what others feel for us, since love is as unfathomable as it is strange and unpredictable.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.